Somewhere in a back room of a Manhattan social club, a hidden microphone was recording. The men inside believed they were speaking in private, about murders, about payoffs, about who controlled which piece of New York. They were wrong, and when prosecutors finally played those tapes in court, the case didn't just hinge on what was said, it hinged on something more basic, proving whose voice that actually was. This is a story about forensic voice analysis, a field that promises something almost too good to be true, that a voice can be read like a fingerprint. The truth is more complicated and more interesting than that promise. The idea took off in 1962 when a Bell Labs scientist named Lawrence Kirsta published research suggesting that the human voice produces a visual pattern, a spectrogram, unique enough to identify a speaker the way a fingerprint identifies a person. He called it voice printing, and the name alone did a lot of the persuading. A fingerprint, everyone already understood, was scientific certainty. Calling this a voice print implied the same thing. A spectrogram works by mapping a recorded sound across two dimensions, time along one axis, frequency along the other, with the darkness of each band representing volume. An examiner would compare a suspect's spectrogram against a spectrogram of the same words spoken by an unknown voice, looking for matching patterns in formant structure, pitch, and the physical shape of the sound. By the late 1960s, spectrographic voice comparison had made its way into American courtrooms, including cases involving organized crime, extortion, and threats, anywhere a recorded voice needed a name attached to it. Nowhere did recorded voices matter more than in the prosecution of the American Mafia. Through the 1970s and 80s, federal investigators shifted their strategy away from relying on informants alone and toward extensive electronic surveillance, planting hidden microphones in cars, homes, and the social clubs where mob bosses conducted business, believing those rooms were safe. The 1986 Mafia Commission Trial in New York is the case that best captures why this mattered. Investigators had bugged the Palma Boys social club, the headquarters of Genovese family boss Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, along with cars and homes used by bosses of the city's other crime families. The recordings captured hundreds of hours of conversation about the inner workings of organized crime. But a recording is only as useful in court as the certainty of who's speaking on it. Prosecutors couldn't simply play a tape and assert whose voice the jury was hearing. They had to build a foundation for it, establishing, witness by witness and recording by recording, that the specific voice captured discussing a specific crime belonged to a specific defendant. That identification process became a quiet but essential piece of machinery underneath one of the largest organized crime prosecutions in American history. A case that ultimately convicted multiple family bosses and sent them to prison for what amounted to life sentences. There are, broadly, two approaches to identifying a voice forensically, and understanding the difference matters. The first is oral spectrographic analysis, the original Kirsta method, combining a trained examiner's ear with a visual comparison of spectrograms. The examiner listens for matching pronunciation quirks, pacing, and pitch, while also comparing the visual pattern of the recordings side by side, looking for a required threshold of matching speech sounds between the known and unknown voice. The second, more informal method is simple lay voice identification. Someone who already knows a person's voice well, like a case agent who's listened to hours of a suspect's recorded calls, testifying that they recognize that same voice on a new disputed recording. Courts have generally allowed this kind of testimony when the witness can show meaningful, extended familiarity with the voice in question. Both approaches were used in different courtrooms throughout the era of major organized crime prosecutions, and both come with very different levels of scientific rigor behind them. Here's where the story gets complicated, and where forensic voice analysis earns its reputation as one of the more contested tools in the field. In 1979, a National Research Council panel conducted a comprehensive review of spectrographic voice identification, examining forensic comparisons made by personnel. Their conclusion was far more cautious than Kirsta's original claims. Voice analysis could be useful, but error rates varied significantly depending on recording quality, the specific technique used, and the individual examiner's skill, a far cry from the fingerprint-like certainty the word voice print implied, and the consequences of getting it wrong have been severe. In the United States, a man named David Sean Pope spent 15 years in prison for aggravated sexual assault, in a conviction based partly on voice print analysis, before DNA testing led to his acquittal in 2001. In France, a man named Jérôme Prieto was wrongfully convicted of a car bombing after his voice was misidentified from a phone call claiming responsibility, a case serious enough that it prompted the French Acoustical Society to formally call for an end to forensic voice analysis in French courtrooms. The honest answer is, it depends enormously on what exactly is being claimed. The core problem is one of individuality. A fingerprint's ridge pattern doesn't meaningfully change. It's a fixed physical structure. A voice is different. It shifts with illness, stress, fatigue, background noise, the quality of the recording device, even the specific words being spoken. Two recordings of the same honest, unaltered voice can look meaningfully different on a spectrogram, and two different people's voices can, under the wrong conditions, look surprisingly similar. That's why the field has moved, over time, toward more cautious language and more rigorous statistical methods. Modern forensic phonetics increasingly relies on quantitative acoustic measurements and probability-based reporting, an expert stating how much more likely a match is under one hypothesis versus another, rather than declaring a flat, "this is the same voice." Forensic voice analysis never fully vanished from courtrooms, but it changed its posture. Fewer experts today claim to positively identify a speaker with certainty. More describe their findings in terms of statistical likelihood, transparent methodology, and known error rates. The same evolution DNA analysis went through decades earlier. In the organized crime prosecutions of the 1980s, the safest and most durable identifications rarely rested on voice analysis alone. They were built from a foundation of corroboration. Agents who watched a suspect enter the room where the bug was recording at the exact time of the conversation. Informants who could place a defendant at the scene. Independent evidence that lined up with what was said on tape. Voice identification worked best not as a standalone verdict, but as one thread in a much larger rope. A recorded voice can be some of the most damning evidence in a courtroom, a person's own words, in their own tone, admitting to things they never meant anyone else to hear. But a voice isn't a fingerprint, and pretending otherwise has cost innocent people their freedom. The real lesson of forensic voice analysis isn't that it doesn't work. It's that "this sounds like him" and "this is him" are two very different claims, and the distance between them is exactly where justice can go wrong.